Good afternoon, everybody. Today is July 11th. My name is Julian Guerrero. I'm with the Tribal Education Department's National Assembly, TEDNA, and we're giving a co-presentation today with the Data Quality Campaign. Today's webinar is the Tribal Education Agencies and Data webinar. For more information, please follow us on tedna.org. Just a few housekeeping notes for today is that all participants are automatically muted. We would appreciate it if you stay muted while the presenters are speaking, and there will be question and answer throughout the webinar. You can either unmute yourself during Q&A or type in your question in the chat box. Today's presenters, we have a total of 5. The first will be from Quinton Roman Nose. Quinton Roman Nose is the Executive Director of TEDNA. Myself, Julian Guerrero, Associate Director with TEDNA. We have Mr. Sam Morseau, the Vice President of the Board of Directors for TEDNA, and as well as he is the Education Director for the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi. We also have Melody McCoy, Staff Attorney with the Native American Rights Fund, as well as Abigal Cohen, Senior Associate Policy Advocacy with Data Quality Campaign. The topics we'll be going over today for today's webinar is the current landscape of tribal education agencies and departments, which will be given by Quinton Roman Nose. Data 101, Data is Foundational to Any Policy Priorities by Abigal Cohen. The current landscape for state education agencies, SEAs, Melody McCoy, and TEA, TED Spotlight, Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, Mr. Sam Morseau. There'll be 2 rounds of Q&A. The first is after Data 101, and the second round of Q&A will be after our Spotlight presenter. That being said, just for the sake of technical definitions, what are TEA TEDs? What is a TEA TED? A Tribal Education Agency, TEA, refers to TEDs who are interested in becoming more knowledgeable of the federal education system so they can interact with state education agencies, SEAs, and local education agencies, LEAs, on various issues affecting Native American students. While a tribal education department, TED, refers to a unit which may operate a variety of programs which may or may not directly relate to education. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and have our first presenter speak, Mr. Quinton Roman Nose. Quinton, you are unmuted, sir, and please.
Hi, this is Quinton Roman Nose. I'm hoping you can hear me, so I'm not sure if this is working. If not, Julian will let me know. But you can. Okay, good. Current landscape of TEAs and TEDs. I don't want to go through the PowerPoint and read each line, but there is certainly no exact count, because I think each tribe has a function of education, and the ones who are more familiar or maybe known are the ones who've actually made the tribal recognition of a certain entity, whether they call it Department of Education, Division of Education, or just education programs. And in some instances, education may be part of another department, or along with other topics, and it may be part of another division. It all depends on the tribe. But I think that the bottom line is, it is the body that's interested in education for their tribal members, tribal citizens. And what are their primary roles? And each of the tribe defines their own role. So I think you have some of the tribes who may, have an entity which may or may not be called a department, but they're to deal with education programs. Usually it's because they want to consolidate administrative functions. If they have a BIE, higher ed, BIE, Johnson Valley program, and any other program that may be education related, and they put someone in charge of it who's responsible to be ensure that various reports are being submitted, the collaboration among the programs. So it may be something simple as that, and then it may be something as large as the like the TEDNA Education Department, department, they call it DOTI, Department of TEDNA Education, in which their tribe has actually initiated a tribal code. They have a bill that addresses, establishes the department and outlines responsibilities and so forth. But I think for those tribes whose departments or TEDs have gone beyond the administrative functions, they realize that in order to better serve the tribal students, they need to address policies, certainly the federal policies, and then how the states interpret the policies at a local level. And I think something that's needed, no matter what size the tribe or the TED is, they need to have the ability to not only seek and collect data, but they need to know how to manage it. And I'm hoping that by this webinar, TED directors, TED staff people will start to get a clear picture of what the value of student data is all about. And I think that if you go up one level within the tribal organization, certainly the tribe needs to have some sort of data system. There are still too many tribes out there that have data systems, but they're just usually produced by the programs that are serving them. So a lot of tribes, some tribes are moving forward where they do have a data system that is intermingled among the various programs. But for tribal education, I think there's some commonalities. One is that there are certain funds allocated for each of the 560 plus tribes, such as higher ed, Johnson Valley, and so forth. And how they administer that, it may be part of the contract, maybe as a part of the self-governance, some other means, or in some cases the BIE may be administering the program. But I think the responsibilities of administration go beyond just those particular programs. As tribes continue to mature their departments, they realize that they need to be knowledgeable of the policies that do affect their students, not only just within their schools, but also within those public schools, and even private schools, who have their students. Many of them are usually in and around tribal reservation lands. And challenges to be addressed by codifying education. I think the increasing the stakeholder buy-in and awareness by tribal government. There's no doubt there's not an elected official in any tribe that will say education is not a high priority. I've heard that over and over again. But the problem of the issue I see is that they recognize the value, but they don't know how to utilize the resources. They don't know how to utilize the TED. They don't know how to give the TED and TA a capacity to build something that's going to be a long lasting. And I think the coordinating of any individual programs needs to be data-based. Too oftentimes, tribes or organizations will go after a grant, and once the grant ends, the purpose and the reasons for the grant goes away also. A lot of times because tribes don't have the funds to do that. But I think that if they would start looking at a bigger picture strategically, where do they want the education of their tribe members to go in the future? I think this is a very good start because every tribe has a need for data. So I'm going to stop right there and turn it back over to Julian.
Thank you, Quinton. This next slide here is the 2017 National TED Map across the nation. Do you have any other comments you'd like to share on this map?
There are many other tribes that have TED. and a lot of them are doing great things. Not all of them, attend some of the TED meetings, and that's fine because each tribe defines their role and function of their own particular TED. But in theory, we should have 560 plus TEDs, but we've got some very, very small tribes. So, but there's many more than this.
Thank you for that, Quinton. Our next presenter, I wanted to introduce Abigal Cohen. She's with the Data Quality Campaign. Abigail, can you hear us?
Thank you to Quinton and Julian for putting this all together.
Thank you. Abigail, it seems that your audio may have cut off there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. So talking a little bit about what we mean when we say student data, how states are collecting and using that data, and then what role TEDs and TED directors can play in creating a culture of data use within their communities and when they're working with states. So DQC is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that believes that when students, parents, educators, and partners, yeah, you can actually go, yeah, that big idea slide, that's perfect. So we believe that when everyone involved in a student's education has the right information to make decisions, students excel. So to help make this vision a reality, we work with state policymakers and leaders in education to help them understand what steps they need to take to ensure that data is used in service of student learning. And we do this because we know that student data is one of the most powerful and important tools that we can use to inform, engage, and create opportunities for every student along their unique education journey. So what you have up on your screen right now is our vision for what it looks like to really use data in service of student learning. So as you can see, we have Grace, our student. She's in the middle, and she's holding her education journey. And what's really important about this is that not only does she know where she is, and does she know where she wants to go, but she has the information and the support to get there. And she knows the steps she needs to take to achieve her goals. And surrounding her are all the people who are also supporting her on that journey. So this includes her parents, her teachers, school leaders, any after school or community partners, and they all have access to the information that they need to support her. So they've created this ecosystem of support all around her, working together, and what has laid the foundation and allowed that to happen is this data and information, and the fact that they all have access to the information they need to make informed choices to support her. So we can move forward to the next slide. So when we talk about student data, we mean much more than just test scores. Unfortunately, when you say data, people's brains automatically jump to standardized test scores. And of course, that's one piece of information that we have access to, but student data can mean lots of different things. So this is our What is Student Data infographic, and it does a great job of showing more broadly what we mean when we say student data. So of course you have your academic information, things like what courses students are taking, their academic growth, their grades, things like their attendance and their behavior, demographic data, of course the information and data that teachers collect on a daily basis through their observations and engagement with students. So all of these data points together form a holistic picture of how students are doing in the classroom. And it's really important to look at all these different data points and not just focus on one single data point and think that that sort of tells the whole story about that student. And the other important piece of this infographic is in the middle where you see these requirements. So again, having one data point or multiple data points and just sort of having them out there, if they're not accessible or understandable to the folks that are using it, they're not going to be as effective as they could be. So in order to be as useful as possible and to really empower the people that are using it, we need the data to meet these 8 different requirements. So I won't run through all of them because you have access to this infographic, but this is things like making sure the data is available when and where you need it or where your stakeholders are accessing it. making sure that it's relevant for their purposes. If you are an after-school provider, you need access to a different kind of information than a classroom teacher or a parent. So making sure what you are collecting and sharing out is meeting the needs of the folks that have to use it. And then of course, all of this has to be secure. So this is everything from, an IT perspective of how you're actually keeping the data secure, but then making sure that the folks that have access to it are trained on how to use it, that they only have access to the data that they need, and that everyone is fully trained and understands student data privacy laws. Next slide, please. So who uses student data? There are different data points for different purposes, like I mentioned before, and who can access that information depends on a number of different factors. So on this infographic, this is sort of telling the story of where data lives and how it travels between schools, districts, states, and then the Federal Department of Education. And what's important to note here is that at the school level is really where you would have personally identifiable information. So this is any information that in its existing format you could attribute back to a specific student. And it's of course important for teachers and school leaders to have this information so that they can make sure that they're providing everything that a child needs to succeed. And as we get further and further out from the school, of course, the amount or availability of personally identifiable information is much and much lessened to the point of the Federal Department of Education. They only have aggregate level information. So we find that this sort of a visual and infographic is really helpful in building trust, especially with parents and community members, to help folks really understand how data is used and who has access to what, and help people trust that their students' data is being used appropriately and really being leveraged to support their student and not for any sort of a nefarious purpose. So I'll also draw your attention to the bottom where we have different stakeholders, and we go into a little bit more detail about how each of them might access or use different types of data. So again, the point here is to help show how data is used, how it's kept protected, and who has access to what types of information. Next slide, please. So with that context in mind, I'd like to shift gears and talk about what TED directors can do to help ensure that data is used to support your students. We released our 4 policy priorities to make data work for students in 2015, and these are the steps we've identified as being necessary in order to achieve our ultimate goal of data in service of student learning. So each of these priorities has a set of specific recommendations within it, and we have recommendations for districts, states, and the federal government. So what I'm sharing today in the next couple of slides is a combination of those different sets of recommendations. We recognize that folks on this call are probably at different points in this process, and so we wanted to make sure that what we're sharing today is relevant to everybody. Next slide, please. So this first, before we get sort of into the specifics of our priorities, we have a set of guiding principles that really undergirds everything that we do and how we talk about our work. So the first is that students are central. Data should be used in service of student learning and to ensure that every student's individual needs are met. It is not just about systems, but about making sure that those systems are working in service of students. To that point, data systems are not enough. Building data systems, we have to move past this and focus on the people, and from using data not only for compliance, but to use it in service of student learning. Data needs to be tailored to the user. So like I said earlier, different users or stakeholder groups are going to have a different need and different purpose for the data that they are accessing. And so while everybody requires quality information, the type and detail of that data is going to depend on the needs of that stakeholder. So that'll be really important to keep in mind as you think about, again, not only what data you might be collecting, but how you're sharing it and who you're sharing it with. Data is used for different purposes. So not all data collected needs to be used for transparency, continuous improvement, and accountability. And in fact, trying to use one data point to meet all 3 of those goals is going to make things pretty messy. So thinking about, again, why and how you're going to use that data point is really important for making sure that it's being used effectively. And finally, stakeholder engagement is critical. So people who need to use the data, like teachers or principals, parents, community members, they really need to be involved in the creation of the tools for access and use. Data are far more likely to be useful and used and trusted if those who need it get to inform the process. So it's really important to have that community buy-in. So not only that they sort of understand what you're doing and why you're collecting information and sharing information, but they can support it and they can be empowered to use it. Next slide, please. Okay, so jumping into our 4 policy priorities. Our first priority is measuring what matters. So as TED directors and staff members, it's important to be clear about what you want to achieve for your students and have the data to ensure it gets done. So whether that means, getting data from the state that you might need or collecting it on your own, being really clear about why you need it and what questions you have that it's going to answer will help streamline the process from the beginning. So within that, developing a set of policy and practice questions will help you set priorities and again, determine the information that you need to answer your questions. Establishing a governance body that has the authority and responsibility to make decisions about data use and protection and policies. Having this sort of central body who is making the key decisions about your data work will be really helpful in streamlining the process, making sure you're making strategic decisions and everybody's sort of rowing in the same direction. If you don't yet have a data system or you're working to create one, again, understanding the needs of your community and making sure that however you're building your system is meeting those needs. And then developing, calculating, and sharing any indicators that you have based on longitudinal data. So over time, looking at different data over time, in addition to measures based on annual assessments, in order to demonstrate any progress towards those goals that you had established when you set your policy and practice questions. Next slide. Making data use possible. So this would be about providing teachers and leaders with the flexibility, training, and support that they need to answer their own questions and take action. So this is really about empowering folks to use the data to make decisions in the classroom or for their students in their communities. So as leaders, using your bully pulpit to allocate resources, so that could be people or time, money or technology, to prioritize using data to inform decision making. So that's really about setting the example, and then creating the necessary policies, practices, and trainings to ensure that staff, educators, and parents, and trusted community partners who receive the data know how to use it effectively. Again, just collecting and sharing the data out, but not sort of helping people understand its value or how to use it is going to mean that that data is not really used to its fullest extent. Next slide. Be transparent and earn trust. Ensure that every community understands how its schools and students are doing, why data is valuable, and how it is protected and used. This is really learning, engaging families and partners in thoughtful conversation about student data, being open to their questions and involving them in planning and governance activities, and then of course communicating the types of data that you're collecting and how it's protected. Next slide. And finally, guaranteeing access and protecting privacy. So providing teachers and parents with timely information on their students and making sure it's kept safe. So these two things go very much hand in hand. First, we have establishing clear and public processes to ensure that student data is kept private. So this is about being really clear both internally and publicly about how you're going to ensure that student data privacy is maintained, while also making sure that everybody who needs access to the information has access to that information and that it's tailored to their needs. So again, if you have engaged your stakeholders in your community in the creation of these policies and practices, ideally you will have their support and their trust in what you're doing, and that will make sort of creating this access a lot easier, and then folks will have the information that they need to do their work. And I think that's it for us.
Well, thank you very much, Abigail. We appreciate that presentation. At this moment in time, we're going to go ahead and break to a Q&A for our Data 101 presentation. Any sort of information or questions you have for TEDNA, specifically Quinton Roman Nose, or Abigail Cohen with Data Quality Campaign. Like I mentioned before, you can either unmute your connection and ask your question to us, or you could go ahead and type your question in the chat box. So are there any questions?
Hi, this is Nicole Bowman.
Yes, ma'am. Hello, Nicole.
Hi, I work for the University of Wisconsin-Madison as an Indigenous researcher and evaluator. I have a question about just the general data use. I'm very interested in what the data quality campaign folks are doing in terms of student data use across systems. Part of my study is the studies that I do is looking at multi-jurisdictional models where state and federal and tribal governments all have to interact to share data, policies, programs, and that gets at the impacts. I hear a lot about tribes using data, setting up data, and I guess what I'm wondering most about are what are the supports for strengthening at the systems level data sharing, and then at the tribal level, anyone who's worked in Indian country for years or decades like I have knows that these are areas that tribes need technical assistance and support with. That's probably a separate issue. The biggest issue I'm looking at, because I even look at Abigail's slide with the types of data, and she has LEAs, state departments of ed, and U.S. Department of Ed, but there's not a circle for the sovereign tribal governments on there. And so I think there's a very deep-rooted issue of the systems problem, because data sets are not talking to each other, and this isn't just obviously in education, it's across the disciplines. Thank you.
Hi, Nicole. This is Abby. Thank you so much for that question. And I'll start off by saying we certainly agree with your observation that systems do not talk to each other the way that they should. And the way we sort of think about that, most of the time we're thinking about sort of the connection between K-12 and early childhood, K-12, higher ed and workforce, and how to get those systems to talk to each other. But I think there's obviously a lot of overlap between what we're thinking about and what you're thinking about. And I think the biggest hurdle is really getting, like you said, getting people to work together and building the trust between those different groups to understand a common understanding of why that would be valuable. We find a lot of times, folks are sort of in their silos, and so they don't really know why connecting their information, if I live in my higher ed world, why would I ever want to connect to K-12 or workforce? And so getting everyone to the same table, which requires a lot of time and commitment from those folks to sort of build that common understanding for why there's value in working together, sort of breaking down any turf issues. These are my students, or, I don't want your data to sort of reflect poorly on me, and get folks to sort of trust the shared mission of why working together is valuable. And as sort of fluffy as that sounds, that's really what we focus on. And when we've seen these collaborations work, it's because they've addressed those issues of time, trust, and turf, and they've taken the time on the front end to address those issues. And then they've been able to sort of get their work up and running, and they haven't hit those roadblocks further down.
Okay, and I think in terms of turf, I think there's a growing body of literature out there in terms of policy, data sharing agreements, building systemic infrastructures. It even kind of has a lot to do with the policy and ethics around sharing of student data. So hopefully we start to see more of that, because I think at least my experience has been strengthening those systemic, not only relationships, I think you hit it right on the head, but just the nuts and bolts of data sharing agreements, and how do we not just get folks at the table, but build the policy
Yeah.
and the I can't say it, operationalizing the policy of, how that happens with data collection. And NCAI and some others are doing some really great work on that University of Arizona Data Sovereignty Project. So hopefully we see more of that embedded into the ed work that we're doing. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I would say that this is a really great place where TEDs can be advocates and share stories of how this data sharing would help their kids, and not only would help their kids specifically, but how that then relates to maybe larger statewide goals or system-wide goals. So sort of this linking folks together towards this one common endpoint, so that everyone feels sort of vested in the work. And I think that TEDs could be really effective in sort of storytelling and sharing. And I think sometimes when we have conversations about systems, it gets very dehumanized and depersonalized. And if you can sort of relate it back to an actual kid, that gets people thinking and maybe opening their minds a little bit more to doing that kind of work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Abigail. Just for the sake of giving everyone an opportunity, is there one more question that anyone would like to ask? Okay. Hearing none, I'd like to transition to our next presenter. We have with us Melody McCoy. She's a staff attorney with the Native American Rights Fund. Melody, I'm going to, if you could either unmute yourself or I could unmute you, and I will give you control.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then I need control.
Yes. Okay. I see your screen.
Do you see it? Let's see here. Somehow, I'm trying to get my PowerPoint up there, but it's not opening up. What do I need to do?
You can just open the PowerPoint. You don't have to drag it in.
Got it. Thanks. That helped. Okay, so this is the segment on the current landscape of collaboration between state education agencies, SEAs, or local education agencies, LEAs, and tribes or tribal education agencies. This presentation, I think, has just 12 slides, and it's really divided into 3 parts. The first part here talks about effective strategies for collaboration between SEAs or LEAs and tribes. And my number one recommendation, yes, I'm an attorney, but in any event, I have to say, when you're talking about collaboration, especially in this area of intergovernmental collaboration, please check out the law. Know the law. If you can't figure it out, ask your designated legal counsel or try to find someone who can help you work through it. And I'll explain that a little bit more as it goes on. But the main thing is just to understand, is there an applicable federal, state, or tribal law or order or policy that might govern or apply to what you're trying to do as far as the collaboration that you're trying to engage in or accomplish. And so pretty simple then, if there is an applicable law from one of the governments, federal, state, or tribal, what does it or what do they require? Try to comply with the law. There may be substantive or procedural requirements. And again, I'll be giving some examples of that, but just up front, it's kind of handy to have this as a checklist. Check out the law first. Maybe you want to sit down the SEA and or the LEA and the tribe discuss it and agree together so that you're both on the same page about what both parties' understanding is of what law applies and what does it require. Continuing on about effective strategies for collaboration, my next point is use good resources. There are good resources, especially in this day and age of the internet and at this point in time in history where we have a slew of national Indian organizations, including the National Congress of American Indians, the National Indian Education Association, the Tribal Education Department's National Assembly, of course. In addition, there's longstanding national state membership organizations, the National Council of State Legislatures, the Chief State School Officers Council, the National Governors Association. All of these organizations, as well as your federal and state agencies and organizations, have websites these days. If you, for some reason, don't have access to the internet, that might impair your search for these resources, but it's really fairly easy to search the internet these days for some good resources about effective strategies. So again, I would suggest that the states, the LEAs, and the tribes review the research you can do on these resources together and identify good examples. And I will give you some examples. There is a publication between the National Congress of American Indians and the National Conference of State Legislatures. In 2009, they put out a publication called Models of Cooperation Between States and Tribes. Now, this is not specific to education, but it's specific to cooperation between states and tribes. And both of these leading organizations put a lot of time and effort into this publication, which is free, downloadable, or readable on or from the internet. NIA, in the wake of the Every Student Succeeds Act, has put together two publications. One is called Building Relationship with Tribes, a Native Process for ESSA Consultation. The other one is A Native Process for Local Consultation under ESSA. And again, these are both available readily on NIA's website. I think it's under their ESSA section, but NIA has put together a very nice compilation of what the ESSA can offer in terms of these collaborations. Another good resource, and I know it's kind of hard to see on this PowerPoint slide, but one of the technical centers, the what do you call it, the Midwest Center, has put together a guide for tribal consultation under the ESSA. This also is readily available on the internet. You can download it, you can view it, no charge. So these are just some examples, again, especially the second two, the NIA and the Midwest Technical Center, are specific to the ESSA and to education collaboration between tribes and states. So once you've done this kind of research and gotten familiar with, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. These organizations have done a lot of work and research to put together these publications. Then I would suggest that the parties, the state SEA, the LEA, and the tribe jointly develop a process or a model for collaboration. This is important, and do it jointly. That's what collaboration is all about. So again, you're going to want to take into account the applicable law. Then you can adopt some of the so-called principles, elements, or strategies and mechanisms from the resources that NCAI, NIA, the technical centers, and any of the other sources you use. I'm going to go over some of the big principles and elements that are put in the publications that I just went over, but you can adopt those principles, elements, and strategies. They're in those publications, and you can adapt them then to your local situation and needs. So, for example, and I just pulled these from the NCAI National Conference of State Legislatures publication and the NIEA publications. And these are kind of a combined, what they do is NCAI suggests essential principles to guide you in collaboration. And NIA suggests essential elements that make successful collaboration. What are these? Well, one, both parties need to commit to cooperate. Both parties need to act with mutual understanding and respect. Both NCAI and NIA emphasize communicating consistently and early on. Don't hold back. Same thing in terms of be prepared and share relevant data and feedback. Agree on how you're going to make decisions, and they both recommend that decision-making be consensus-based so that the parties reach consensus on decisions they're making. Also, try to agree on a process for addressing issues and an accountability for addressing issues. Take steps to institutionalize your relationships, and I'll talk a little bit about more about that in a minute, but agree on ways how to best sustain the progress that you make when you undertake collaboration. So these are the suggested essential principles or elements. These are very broad. They're intended to be broad, but they're also proven to be effective. You're not the only ones, probably, from your tribe or from your state or from your LEA that are trying to collaborate. So take advantage of those who've gone before you and build on their success. Getting a little bit more technical, the NCAI and the NIEA publications both suggest effective mechanisms for collaboration. These are separate and apart, but kind of coterminous with the principles and elements. So, for example, set up a joint committee or a task force that's tasked or charged with overseeing and coordinating the collaboration that you're trying to accomplish. Yes, you can do a memorandum of agreement, a memorandum of understanding, or a protocol. Those are very, very helpful. Typically, one of the top 3 effective strategies is to put it in writing in the form of an MOA or MOU or protocol. So both parties, all parties, are clear about what the purpose of the collaboration is, the goal of the collaboration, the means of collaboration, the responsibilities each and every party has in collaboration, and other things that can, go into writing that we're going to, for example, review this. So a review mechanism. collaboration itself and effective strategies, or on the substantive matter that you're collaborating on. And you need, again, to plan together for that. So all of these mechanisms or activities are recognized as being effective strategies by your leading national organizations, state and tribal, for collaboration. And they can easily be translated into the education area if they're not already. So the next part of this PowerPoint is going to focus on what I was asked to talk about, are unique opportunities for collaboration under the Every Student Succeeds Act, which of course is the most recent reiteration of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which goes back to 1965, but every so often is reauthorized by Congress, and the reauthorization in 2015 is known as the Every Student Succeeds Act. So what does the ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, do for us in terms of collaboration? Well, the big thing is that now SEAs, or states, when they submit their plans to the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, for Title I funding, and this is new, they must consult or include all the tribes, with the federally recognized tribes within their states. This is a new requirement. So it's a new legal requirement, and the consultation must be timely and meaningful. So obviously the state cannot just, as it submits its plan to the U.S. Department of Education, toss a copy to the tribes and say, oh, here's what we're going for. Tribes in every state must be included in timely and meaningful consultation for Title I funding plans submitted by states. This is the law, and there's the citation to the codified version of the law in Title 20 of the United States Code. There's also a federal regulation in the Code of Federal Regulations, and that's 34 CFR, Section 299.15A5. I'm going to give you these citations, and just, this is just going back to what I said, know the applicable law. If you haven't come across this law before, it's new. We're all, both tribes and states are working under it for the first time ever since it was passed in 2015. It's easy for me as an attorney to read the law. It's, I think, a little bit more involved for those who are actually at the state and tribal level doing this consultation to do what they need to do to implement and comply with the law. So I'm not going to give you a lot of details on that. I'm just telling you that this is the law. Also under the ESSA, there is now a very high-level state tribal education partnership program in the law. This came from the it was originally a pilot demonstration project that started under the Obama administration, but it now is permanently in the ESSA as a legal, not a requirement, but an option. So it allows for TEA, Tribal Education Agency, coordination and collaboration with SEAs and LEAs to meet the unique educational and culturally related academic needs of Indian students. Again, it's a full-blown program, but it's discretionary and it's by application only. And there's the citation for it. Some of you may be familiar with the state tribal education, the STEP partnership program, but this is now made a part of the law. Again, it's not mandatory, it's optional, but it's a very high-level optional program. At the local level, and this is also new in the ESSA, for all ESSA programs, all Every Student Succeeds Act programs, LEAs must consult with area tribes on issues affecting American Indian and Alaska Native students. And they must document that consultation. The LEAs are charged with documenting the consultation for the SEAs. Now, this is new, again, so we're all kind of, and I think this is what sparked a lot of the NIEA publications about the local consultation. And again, the law simply requires the consultation and documentation. It doesn't go into a lot of detail about what consultation exactly is in real time. But I think, tribes and LEAs are working that out as they should at the local level. So again, it's easy for me to say that this is now the law, and this one is mandatory. It's a must consult and must document. So the final part here, I'm going to give some examples of collaboration between SEAs or LEAs and tribes. And some of these are tied to the ESSA and some are not. For example, before the passage of the ESSA in 2015, the state of Washington, the one up in the Pacific Northwest, passed its own law that authorizes tribal state education compacts under Washington state law. This isn't a federal law. It is the law of the state of Washington. But I pulled this out and I tied it to, I think as I did most of these examples, because this is a data quality webinar, I looked for the provisions. There are 4 tribes now that have entered into compacts under the state of Washington's law. Muckleshoot, I think Quinault, and I can't off the top of my head remember the other ones, but they're, oh, here they are. It's Muckleshoot and Quinault, and the most recent one is Quileute. And there's, oh, I think it's Suquamish is also in there. And their compacts are available on the internet as well. They're just called State Tribal Education Compacts between the Washington State Superintendent of Public Instruction and the fill in the blank for each of the 4 tribes. So I took a look at these compacts. The most recent one, the Quileute one, was signed just a year ago in June of 2016. And I tried to understand what these compacts provide in terms of data, because I know that's the focus of this webinar. So in each of these compacts, which are very similar, there is a provision in Part 3B1 called Student Data and Enrollment Reporting. 3 of the 4 tribes have this provision that the tribes agree, and again, this is a compact, so it's obviously it's a very formal example of collaboration. The tribes agree to report their school enrollment to the state in the same manner and using the same definitions of enrolled students and annual average full-time equivalent enrollment as is required of state public school districts. Again, I have no personal knowledge of exactly how that provision got negotiated and into the compact, or exactly, I mean, I can surmise what the intent of it is, but I don't personally know. If one wanted more information about that, I think one would contact either the tribe or the state of Washington. The most recent one, Quileute, agrees that the school will report school enrollment to the state in the same manner and using the same definitions of enrolled students and annual average full-time equivalent enrollment. So we have these 2 different versions. The 3 larger tribes are agreeing to report their own school enrollment to the state, but they're using the state requirements. The Quileute tribe, a little bit smaller tribe, is agreeing the school will report school enrollment. And then in all of these 4 tribes compacts, the tribe agrees to meet on reporting requirements as outlined by the state's data manual, whatever that is. So I just pulled from these compacts these provisions on student data and enrollment reporting to see how SEAs and tribes in the state of Washington are collaborating on student data and reporting. Another example, of course, is I had referred to the State Tribal Education Partnership Program. This one, I just pulled the Idaho Nez Perce Tribe one, which was entered into before the ESSA, but it's the same program. And I took a look, and they have a final agreement components on data in their final agreement as related to the unique educational and cultural needs of American Indian Alaska Native students. And here's generally, this isn't exactly what it's not an exact quote, but the tribe gets access to this American Indian Alaska Native student data in compliance with FERPA, the Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act, to assist the Tribal Education Agency to set strategic focus and action plans to improve students' educational outcomes. So as I read this provision, the big thing is the tribe gets access to the data to assist it in setting strategic focus and action plans. And that's what was the result, the negotiated result of this program, of this STEP program agreement on the collaboration on data. Another example, a very, very recent one, just took a new law in Wyoming, took effect in March of 2017. And this is the exact wording of the law. The state board, through its Department of Education, shall, in cooperation with tribes of the region, including the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes, evaluate and review existing state social studies content and performance standards to ensure that the cultural heritage, history, and contemporary contributions of American Indians are addressed in the state's social studies content and performance standards. So this is a very remarkable and new law about, and again, this has nothing to do with a federal mandate or law. It's just the state saying, yes, we will cooperate with the two tribes in our state to review the content and performance standards of our social studies to be sure that the tribal history, heritage, and contributions are included and addressed. And the next part of the law says the State Department of Education shall, in consultation with the tribes, make available materials and resources on the department's official website to assist school districts in meeting social studies benchmarks within Wyoming social studies content performance standards relating to the study of American Indian tribes. So again, you see that now, even in the law here, this idea of making available materials and resources on the department's official website becomes part of the mechanism of this collaboration. So the last slide I always just want to mention is that in some states, and I use Minnesota as an example, again, this is not pursuant to any federal law or policy, but back in 2013, the governor of Minnesota issued an executive order that all state agencies must have a consultation policy with the tribes within Minnesota. So the Minnesota Department of Education came out with its consultation policy in 2014. It's as simple as this. The Minnesota Department of Education shall consult with the Tribal Nations Education Committee, which is something that was formed by the consultation policy, and it's an intertribal committee, and tribes on all aspects of education policy that the state is doing, implementing and developing. And this is the key, before taking action that will significantly affect one or more tribes. So again, this is the kind of thing that we're seeing now on paper. It's remarkable. I can't believe, if anyone had told me, 20 or 30 years ago that states and tribes would be at this point where they're agreeing on this without any federal requirement that they do so, I probably would have sneered or at least looked a little suspicious. But this is the level that we're at now. And so, you know, some other states, a handful of other states have similar types of mechanisms like this. But when you put this in writing and institutionalize it, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, frankly, it's got to be self-enforcing. You're not going to get, for example, a federal court to hold the state to this. But by and large, you know, it works, and it's far better than having nothing at all. I don't have any direct experience with how this is working in Minnesota. I'd be curious to know if it's been helpful or not. But this is a very high-level example at the state of collaboration. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you for that, Melody. We appreciate that presentation. We're going to do one more presentation, and then we'll go ahead and open up for our final round of Q&A. That being said, our next presenter will be Mr. Sam Morseau, the Vice President of TEDNA, as well as the Education Director for the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi. Sam, are you online with us?
I am. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir. We can hear you loud and clear. I'm giving you control now.
All right. Everybody can see the PowerPoint all right?
I can see the PowerPoint. Yes, sir.
Looks good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sam Morseau. I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Education for the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi. I also serve as the Vice Chairman for the Tribal Education Directors of Michigan and the Vice President of the Tribal Education Directors National Assembly. Very excited about giving this presentation today. You know, it's really important when we think about data design that we really think about our children. You know, it's always great to starting off with a quote, and it's really about how you approach it. Because when you approach a lot of different agencies, there's a tendency to get either defensive or offensive in regards to the data. So we took this approach and let's put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. And that's really what it's about. It centers our focus and our focus on our students. Oftentimes, a lot of the questions you got, well, who controls Native American data? Followed by the ever so popular, what are you going to do with it? And it really comes down to who has the data, who wants the data, and who needs the data. And I'm very thankful for our previous presenters for giving such a thorough and accurate example of what kind of data goes to what level, and also who has control over that data or responsibilities of protecting that data. In reality, she was spot on in terms of who has the data. The LEAs have the individualized data. Who wants the data? Oftentimes, aggregate data gets sent to the SEA or federal education agencies. But who really needs the data? And it really comes down to the succession planning and long-term sustainability of tribes that need access to that information. And that has been historically difficult due to FERPA laws and not having the best government-to-government relationships. You know, so we're going to go through a quick snapshot. You know, there are 644 Native American students in the US K-12 system, representing 1.2% of the population. 90% of our Native students attend public schools, while only 8% go to BIE schools. So when you're looking at data and where the data is formulated, you really have to kind of understand what all of these different subsets are. You know, with the mid-level snapshot with the state of Michigan, that's based on Native student enrollment, and Native American students in Michigan is 13,487. And then they break it down by percentage and the counts and the highest ISDs. But you really have to ask yourself, for instance, the Pokagon Band has the Title VI grant, which covers 2 states in Michigan and Indiana, has 10 counties, 47 districts, 535 Native American students for $122,000. Now, when you're thinking about Native American students, you have to ask your question, and this is what I always bring up to professional development trainings that I present. You know, where is the data integrity? And I'll give you a perfect example. We, in our Title VI, have 535 Native American students in the Title VI service area. We have through our own enrollment records, we have 654 Pokagon Band citizens between the ages of 5 and 17 in the 10-county service area. So you're already looking at 119 Pokagon citizens that are not included in our Title VI count. Now, some of you could say, that could be because they dropped out of school, they're homeschooled, they're going to private school, there could be incarcerated or other options. But then you also have to think about there are 2 other tribal nations of similar sizes, less than 75 miles away, and we all share at least 1 county of overlapping service areas. In addition, Title VI allows for not only the student, but it could be the student's parent or the student's grandparent to be an enrolled citizen of a state or a federally recognized tribe. So if we are saying that we only have 535 in our 10 counties, where are all the other Native Americans? Where are all the Sioux and Cheyenne and Navajo that are in the school districts and not in their reservation settings? I can tell you right now that 487 of those 535 are Pokagon citizens. So we're capturing a small percentage of Native Americans who either are from other tribes in the state or also other tribes across the nation. Now that really becomes really important because this information is getting reported not only to the state and national level. Sometimes it gets reported to the state depending on the population. So you really have to think about the data integrity in terms of who is Native American, how are they counted, and why are they being counted as well. So that's kind of the 3 main questions I wanted to pose to you today. I did create this PowerPoint for state educators and as well, and it turned out to be like an hour and a half. So I'm briefly going to move through SEA, TEA, and LEA and get back to the BIE and the title, the data sharing agreement. So Every Student Succeeds Act, everybody's aware of that right now, previously known as the No Child Left Behind Act. It gives reauthorization and more freedom to states to implement standards and accountability. NIEA followed up talking about the Title 34 regulations, that the regulations are consistent with the most widely agreed upon conclusion from educational efforts over the last 20 years. Accessible data on students is essential to improving education for groups of students who have historically not been served well. As we move forward into the states, it's really important that all of these different organizations have the children in mind. And it's really about how we leverage our strengths to other people's weaknesses so we can make a better system all around. So we approached the state when ESSA was talking about sending the state plan in, and we met with the educators and we talked about just the importance of getting tribal education agencies listed into the language. Once you get it in there once, the awareness starts to pick up, and then you get more and more conversation about Native American issues, not only as it relates to data, but as it comes to cultural opportunity gaps and things of that nature. So as we began completing our relationship with the Michigan Department of Education, a lot of the different talking points up. And so I was so pleased when this first came up, when they were talking about the dissemination of ESSA, where they had tribal education entities listed in there. So that was a small win for the tribal education directors, because at least we're being recognized as an educational entity. And then they went further. They said, okay, we know that there is a government-to-government consultation with the Michigan federally recognized tribes. We are going to plan and do this and process and product, and to create a foundation for supporting our Native students. So, okay, they're starting to sound a little bit more committed. In addition, they had 4 main points, 3 of which they came up with, saying, okay, tribal education departments are throughout all foundational plan documents. They're committed to quarterly consultation between the state education agency and the federally recognized tribes, and they're committed to one-on-one consultation between the SEA and tribal nation individually. But one of the things that we're most happy about is they accepted a document, a guidance to the Michigan Department of Education that really talked about what does tribal consultation mean. And through the help of Dimple Patel at NIEA and the Tribal Education Directors National Assembly, we were able to create a guide specific to the Michigan Tribal Education Directors as it relates to the state of Michigan. So that was a glowing success that I think that will set the foundation for the next 10 to 15 years. Some of the compelling questions for SEAs and TAs as they continue to develop their consultation, and what does, are these 9 points? So this was developed in between the state education agency and the tribal education directors to start as a the foundational plan document. Our hope is that the state of Michigan will come back in response in writing to each one of these 9 questions that will allow to future consideration as we move forward in ESSA. I'm not going to read them for you. Feel free to browse them for yourself, and this presentation will be available afterhand. Again, 6 through 9. And these are very simple questions, answers that a lot of tribal education directors already knew the answers to, and a lot of state education employees knew the answers to, but we wanted to get it down on paper in terms of how are we meeting the requirements of ESSA. So those are a couple of the quick, compelling questions between state education agencies and tribal education agencies. We also had the opportunity to do a SWOT, which is a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we gave a SWOT to each one of the 4 groups, or the 3 groups. In addition, we've also had the opportunities for us to answer on behalf of those groups. So you'll be able to see the SWOTs for the state, tribal, and local education agencies. And I want everybody to pay attention really to the left, because when it comes to a trilateral data sharing agreement, those are the key points that will be, in turns into the future. So for the state, they'll have greater access to Title VI student data. A lot of times, student data is gone from the Title VI program in the state directly to the federal government. So none of that information is actually getting transferred to the state. As a tribal nation, I don't have to report that information to the state. And as a Title VI school, a public school, they didn't have to report their information to the state either. So they thought that would be a great avenue to increase accountability. Greater accountability in ensuring LEAs meet ESSA consultation requirements. It meets several goals identified with Michigan's vision of being top 10 in 10. And it provides relevant educational statistics of Native Americans based on tribal service area. One of the issues that we had found, and we brought it up to the state, is it's very difficult to get information or data on Native American students, because oftentimes in the rural populations, the population is so small that they cannot report to that. So the tribes actually went to the state and said, what would be great is if you could show us based off our tribal service area, which is hugely important in taking care of our communities, not only our own tribal citizens, but our tribal nations as a whole. It sets up a foundation to increase tribal to tribal communication and correspondence in caring for that data. So that was really important. They were really receptive to that. And hopefully at the end of this academic year, we will be able to have dashboards based on the tribal service area. This again, top 10 in 10, the guiding principles of the state of Michigan. There's 5 main components. As it relates, they have 7 strategic goals in order to be the top 10 in 10. And so we're basically looking at these strategic goals to see where we can infuse Native American initiatives or goals or objectives. So aligned with one of the top 10 in 10 initiatives, a guiding principle. Data and accountability will be used to help drive resources and focus improvement activities for students and educators with attention and transparency. This really sets up what we're trying to do with this trilateral data sharing agreement, because it allows each person to demonstrate their strengths to the collection of the whole. This is an avenue or a dashboard of what each school environment will look like, with dropout rates, mobility. This would all be excellent information to have on service areas as well. And then you have the revamped school report card. So all this information would be greatly beneficial to not only LEAs or SEAs, but the TEAs as well. They have some closing thoughts that I'd really like to talk about. Would be keeping children as our primary focus, and with a thoughtful preparation, data collection, data analysis, goal setting, plan development, program implementation, monitoring and evaluation will be successful in helping ensure the success of every Michigan student. Now we'll get into the tribal education agencies. Pokagon Band is doing something very unique with a citizen-focused interface. What we found is we've increased efficiency and data integrity by allowing the citizen to enter information. So you think about all those applications that tribal citizens fill out, turn into different departments. Some could have misreading what it says based off legibility, or maybe they mistype something. This is all now going into a centralized database that basically the Pokagon staff will able to be monitor and to fix if there's duplicates, but 90% of the information that's being entered is based off the citizens' data. Now, this is really important when it comes down to efficiency, because that data is automatically workflowed to the different departments. So a lot of times with tribal organizations or governments in whole, it's very siloed, because you have the Department of Social Services or the Department of Education or administration, but nobody really knows what's going on until somebody fills out an application or request for services. By using an interactive approach where the citizen is requesting services, or the citizen's the focus, it basically creates workflows that triggers email systems within our data collection systems to start processing those services, which is tremendously beneficial, because when you think about trying to update information such as where our students are going to school, what their grades are, what their schedule is, it becomes very difficult for tribal nations, because they're not only dealing with one state, they're dealing with possibly 50 states, and how many different school districts and ISD, which is within each one of those states, do they have to work individually with. And sometimes it's only to get one student's information. So by putting the priority on the citizen parent or the citizen itself, has proved to be tremendously beneficial. Again, we also look at actuary data, and it's really important for tribes to look at actuary data, because they're looking at the programs and services that looks to drive their entire nation. So it looks like, where we're at in our current population and where we'll be in 20 years. We always talk as tribal nations to taking care of the next 7 generations. We're barely trying to keep up with the next 2 generations, ensuring that we have enough financial resources, programs, and services to help our citizens. So we look at Pokagon Band actuary data, and here's a perfect example. In 2017, there was 490 students who received 2.8 million in scholarships. By the time that it's in 2037, we'll have between 728 and 945, which could be 4.23 million to 5.5 million. So when you're forecasting 2 generations in front, you're looking at scholarships. Okay, we're going to have to reduce the amount of scholarships, not offer scholarships. Are you going to be able to use your per cap or trust funds to offset some of the educational costs as an organization? How are we going to best serve our citizens, not now, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future, if things don't change and we don't have a lot of different economic diversification with our subsidiaries. Same thing, state education agency also always says from cradle to career. Tribal education agency is basically womb to tomb, from prenatal all the way up to death. We're trying to provide the best possible educational systems for our students or citizens. Again, and how it maximizes with succession building. By looking at our citizen needs, we're able to look at potential companies or areas of consideration when it comes to creating these programs and services. It has been designated that the government will be working on tribal leadership, nursing and health, and agriculture. The casino will be working on management and hospitality. And then Manoba Matson, which is our economic development, will be looking at union and trade schools and business design. So we're using our collegiate partnerships to formulate these different programs specific to tribal education citizens. So we can send them through in a cohort model, which leads up to a greater idea of success. But using this data as for succession planning or nation building not only helps the tribe or helps the citizen, but it helps the community in the whole as well, because you're able to forecast the needs of the community based on the workforce that you have. Again, citizen-focused interface. Tribal nations that utilize their inherent right to collect data have a greater success in determining the long-term sustainability and vitality of their tribe. A citizen-focused interface provides a proactive approach to tribal nations to respond to citizen needs. Linking citizen information to educational data is vital in proactive strategic planning, and real-time interactivity allows for a holistic snapshot of a citizen and tribal nation. Tribes are in a unique spot to be able to create and collect data on students from the time they were born till the time that they die or leave the educational world or go into different things. not only as it's education, they have health information, social services information, all this data that's coming into our system that we should be able to quantify and be able to use to better assist our citizens and our tribe moving into the future. There's quick videos that you can look at a later date and time. In the instance of time, we're going to move forward. The first one talks about what the citizen interface looks like and how it coordinates with each one of the departments and how it makes citizens feel. And then the second one is really about the dashboards. But because of the data is being put in by the citizens, we're able to get real-time dashboards or interactive dashboards that I'm able to take to tribal council or government manager. Each one of these lines I could click on, and it would give me a list of students with the information that's been put in there, what programs and services they've received, family information. Of course, it's all leveled off by different administrative rights and viewing access. But this allows a quick snapshot, real time, that you're not building a report and then 5 days later it gets old. Again, we also have a centralized document database, which allows citizens to submit grades, schedules, IEPs, 504 plans, that we're able to keep that data within our own system. And it has a lifelong personalized citizen profile, which is absolutely fantastic. The higher education portal, again, our students are all across the nation, go to several different colleges and universities. A lot of them are on smartphones or on their laptops. They're able to enter the information day or night, 24-hour service. It tells them where they're at in the scholarship process. Again, shows us interactive dashboards, key performance indicators. And it's been truly phenomenal because it cuts down on the emails, call times, where am I at in terms of the process. And it's really slimmed it down. So whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a student can log in and see exactly where they're at or what forms are needed to complete their scholarship. Another video that talks about the portal. But again, this really helps us in real time because we're able to look at the data and see when the information is being submitted, so we can look at workflows and productivity in terms of time and resources. You can see in August is one of our bigger months, and then in November. Well, that correlates with the scholarship semesters. Again, you can break it down by freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, grad. You can click on each one of the arrows if you want to find out information, or zoom out to see even more information. So the data mining capabilities are fantastic. I'm going fast. I really have to speed up. I know we only got 5 minutes left. So again, SWAT, based on the tribal education agencies. On the left-hand side, greater access to service area data, individualized student data, greater access to state and national assessments, graduation and attendance rates, GPA, connects all Native Americans to local tribal resources, and allows tribes to make long-term sustainable strategic plans based on data-driven decision-making. Because we are lucky and fortunate enough to have our own Title VI grant, I wanted to put this in there to show that, yes, we do work with local education agencies, with student surveys, interviews, culturally relevant and responsive academic enrichment. It also has a thing on the Title VI and what different title programs you're working with. Is the program available in the local school district? Is it available or coordinated with Title VII services? Collegiate partnerships, talked a little bit about them. We have several collegiate partnerships that we work with, not only to drive down tribal costs, but to set up tribal cohorts for our students. This is what the assessment path currently looks like. All of this academic information is given to the Namatsum once they apply. That is met with intake interviews, CAPS, COPS, and COPES. Then it's sent off to the respective human resources department for performance evaluations, training development, orientation, interviews, job fit applications. So it's really about creating a professional culture across all of our tribal entities. LEAs, the current issues with Native American students data. Who is Native American? Process of self-identification. A lot of times either the families or the administrative assistants are making the call on who's Native American based off looks or feelings or bias within the family unit or within the school system. What are Native Americans federally or state recognized? Some Native Americans aren't state recognized. You also have the Title VI where it says the parent or the grandparent can be the enrolled citizen and not the student. which is a great benefit, should really boost Title VI numbers. And then the age-old Title 2010 census. Whereas if you came from a mixed family and part of your family was Hispanic, you're automatically counted as Hispanic and not Native American. So there's a lot of current issues in terms of collecting, administrating, promoting Native American student data, and we can talk about that for hours. Again, what I want to talk to you about the data problems, a lot of time when the information is reported up to the state, the population is so low that they can't do that for fear of identifying who those Native American students are. So there's a gap already from the LEA to the LCA in terms of data transmission and transparency. Local education agencies, their SWAT, it provides greater supports for Native American students to access tribal resources. It meets the tribal consultation requirement, increased professional development opportunities, increased awareness of government-to-government relationships, and meets the holistic approach of direct student instructional services. Compelling questions, there are 13 of these. Again, they were included in the tribal consultation guide for LEAs to think about when they're meeting with the tribal education agencies. Comes back to our original question. You know, they say that there are 644,000 American Indian and Alaska Natives in the US K-12 system. Who are those Native Americans? They say that 90% of Native students attend public school and only 8% attend schools administered by the BIE. Again, Pokagon Band has 2 states, 10 counties, 47 districts, 535 Native American students. This is how much we receive to serve those students across those 10 counties. Where are all the Native American students? If you start off with data integrity concerns, by the time it gets to the state or federal level, you've already lost the data that you're trying to track. Those were the 4 data sharing agreements with the SWATs based on each quadrant. And we basically came up with a plan. This is the quick plan. It's basically a tribal, state, local education agency, interagency workflow. The 506 is what drives the Title VII. So the local education agency will put a 506 form in every enrollment packet. Every asked the student who's listed as Native American to complete the 506 form. You would send the 506 forms and grades and assessments to the TEA, receive cultural resources and professional development from the TEA, meet ESSA's accountability criteria, and meet ESSA's tribal consultation criteria. Tribal education agencies will verify the Native American list. They will send the list of citizen students attending that specific LEA if they're tribal citizens. They will enter LEA data into the tribal records management system, which is our own records management system. They will provide available supplemental services to Native American students, strategic planning based on data-driven decision-making. The state and the feds, they want to enter in the data sharing agreement with the tribes, create dashboard on the tribal service area, accurate data on Native American students, and it meets the ESA tribal consultation and accountability criteria. And then the last couple of ones are basically those compelling questions that were listed in the guide. And then I'm done. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Sam. This is Julian. We appreciate your presentation there. I'm going to go ahead and take back control on my end.
All right.
I know we're speeding through. We have to wrap up here in the next 2 minutes. We're in our final Q&A segment. Before I move to any other questions, there have been 2 previous questions I want to touch base on, and I'm going to combine them for the sake of time here. The first, and these questions will be directed to Sam Morseau and Melody McCoy. The first question from Loy Harper is there a definition for timely and meaningful consultation? How is meaningful defined, and what is considered timely? And that's combined with also Jacob Sotai asked, are states required by law to consult directly with tribes then? ? So either Melody or Sam, do one of you want to take a shot at that?
I think I'll pass that to Melody.
Okay, I can try. Let me just ask Julian for clarification on that very last one, which was fast. Tell me, what was the last one? Are states required by law to what now? What was the?
Are states required by law to consult directly with tribes? Question.
Okay. The short answer is there are very few laws that require states to consult with tribes on anything. Most federal laws require federal agencies to consult now with tribes. Now, of course, if you're talking about some federal law like the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act or like the Indian Child Welfare Act, that is a very specific and discrete process for dealing with gaming compacts or Indian Child Welfare Act cases that are in the tribal and state courts. What you have in the Every Student Succeeds Act, though, is a remarkable new provision in federal law that, yes, requires states to consult with tribes within their states for their Title I funding plans. Yes, that is a mandatory requirement, and it is new, and it is really unprecedented. Most federal laws don't require states to do that. This one does. Yes. As far as what is timely and meaningful consultation, again, that's a lot less defined in law and more subject to, of course, disagreement or agreement between the parties. For example, there's the federal law that requires the Bureau of Indian Education to consult with tribes before taking certain actions regarding BIE-funded schools. And that is a pretty strict requirement. But as far as most of the requirements on states, there's less of a definition in the law. The law typically leaves it up to the parties to either agree or, of course, disagree on what's timely and meaningful consultation. And we don't have a lot of, for example, court cases that are interpreting that or that are trying to come to a decision on that. You'll see more of that with the federal laws that require federal agencies to consult with tribes on various things, including environmental matters and other kinds of regulatory matters. So that's why it's important, I think, that if the parties can agree on what is timely and meaningful, whether it's 60 days, 30 days, meaningful means something like, you have your decision. Meaningful typically means you have your decision makers there at the table. So it's not one of these things where people come and they're like, oh, that's nice, I hear you, but I can't make that decision. I got to take it back to my boss. Okay, that's typically not very meaningful. Meaningful means you're prepared, you have your decision makers there, and that it's not just, how can I say it? Here's what we're going to do. Got any problems with it? That it really does allow for input and flexibility and consensus-based decision-making. So those are just some of my thoughts. I don't know if that completely answers the question, but the more the parties can specify what's timely and meaningful, the better off you're going to be, because anytime you can agree on something, that typically avoids a dispute.
Thank you, Melody. We appreciate that. Just for the sake of time, we unfortunately have run out of time here. And I wanted to also share and give my appreciation to all the presenters, Quinton Roman Nose, Abigal Cohen, Morseau, Melody McCoy. We appreciate your time. Thank you to all the viewers who joined us today. This recording will be available at TEDNA.org by this Friday. including some notes that we've taken here at the office. You can always email us additional questions at info@tedna.org, or go to tedna.org and you'll get that information too. We appreciate everybody's attendance. Thank you again. Everyone have a great day.